My parents forced me to give up my college fund to my golden child brother, but after 4 years of hard work and struggle, I finally made it. Then they showed up to my graduation demanding money, and oh boy did I have a surprise for them. I, 22F, need to get this off my chest. 4 years ago, my parents did something that completely changed our relationship forever, and now karma has finally caught up to them. I've been holding this in for so long, and after recent events, I feel like I'm finally ready to share my story. It's long, but I promise it's worth the read. Growing up in a middle-class suburban home with my parents and older brother, it was always crystal clear who the golden child was in our family. From the moment I could understand family dynamics, I knew I was second best. They had James when they were in their early 30s after trying for several years, and I came along unexpectedly 2 years later. My brother James, 24M, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was their miracle baby. They had tried for years before having him, and maybe that's why they spoiled him so much. If he got C's in school, they'd praise him for trying his best and hire expensive tutors. If I got straight A's, they'd barely acknowledge it, usually saying something like, well, school just comes easier to you, you should help your brother study instead of showing off. Every achievement of mine was overshadowed by whatever James was doing at the time, even if what he was doing was essentially nothing. I still remember my 16th birthday, when they canceled my small dinner party because James had a soccer game, which he ended up skipping anyway to hang out with his friends. Or my high school graduation, where they left early because James was feeling uncomfortable. Translation, he was bored. Every milestone in my life seemed to get minimized or pushed aside for James's comfort. But the real breaking point, the moment that shattered any illusions I had about my place in the family, came during my senior year of high school. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The weather was beautiful, I had just received my acceptance letter, and I thought nothing could bring me down. I was so wrong. I had worked incredibly hard, gotten excellent grades, and was accepted into my dream university with a partial scholarship. My mom had set up college funds for both James and me when we were young. James had already blown through his portion partying at community college before dropping out after 2 semesters. Meanwhile, I had been planning my future around my portion of the fund. Then, 1 month before I was supposed to start college, my parents dropped a bomb on me. James had come up with a brilliant business idea and needed startup capital. They had decided to give him my entire college fund, $50,000 that was supposed to be for my education. When I protested, they told me I could just take out loans or go to community college instead. My brother's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was apparently more important than my education. I was devastated. All my careful planning went out the window. My partial scholarship wouldn't be enough on its own, and my dream school suddenly seemed impossible. But I refused to give up. I took a gap year, worked 3 jobs, applied for every scholarship I could find, and eventually cobbled together enough money to start school, albeit a year later than planned. The past 4 years have been incredibly difficult, filled with moments where I almost gave up. I worked 3 jobs during my gap year: barista in the mornings, library assistant in the afternoons, and waitressing on weekends. During college, I scaled back to 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load. There were nights I cried myself to sleep in my tiny apartment, wondering if I had made the right choice by not giving in to my parents' demands. The apartment was so small that my bed barely fit, and the neighborhood was sketchy enough that I carried pepper spray everywhere. But I refused to let their actions define my future. I worked part-time throughout college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, ate ramen noodles, and pinched every penny. Meanwhile, James's brilliant business idea, a cryptocurrency trading scheme, failed spectacularly within 6 months. He lost every cent of my college fund. My parents never apologized. They never acknowledged how their actions impacted my life. I stopped speaking to them except for brief, mandatory holiday calls. They seemed perfectly fine with this arrangement until last week, my college graduation. After almost 4 years of minimal contact, my parents showed up uninvited to my graduation ceremony. I hadn't invited them, but somehow they found out about it through extended family. They showed up uninvited to my graduation ceremony, which was bad enough. But what happened afterward is what prompted me to write this post. You see, during my time in college, I hadn't just been studying. Those endless nights of ramen noodles and cheap coffee had given me plenty of time to think about my future. I knew I needed to find a way to ensure I would never be financially vulnerable to my family again. The idea for my business came from watching local shops struggle with their outdated systems while I was working as a waitress. Most couldn't afford the big consulting firms, but they desperately needed help joining the digital age. I'd started a small tech consulting business on the side, targeting local small businesses who needed help with digital transformation. It started as a way to make extra money, but it grew far beyond my expectations. By my senior year, I was making 6 figures and had several employees working for me. After the ceremony, my parents cornered me outside the auditorium. At first, they tried to act like proud parents, saying how happy they were to see me graduate. Then they got to their real reason for coming: they needed money. James had racked up massive credit card debt, they had refinanced their house multiple times to help him, and now they were at risk of losing everything. They expected me to help the family since I was doing so well. It was the same pattern as always: James makes mistakes, and everyone else needs to fix them. I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity of these people, to take my college fund, give it to my irresponsible brother, force me to struggle for years, and then show up demanding more money? I told them exactly what I thought about their request. Remember 4 years ago when you said giving James my college fund was a good investment? Well, I made an investment too, in myself. And unlike you, I'm not sharing the returns. My mom started crying about how I was being selfish and how family should help family. My dad tried to guilt-trip me about how hard they'd worked to raise me. I just smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind that comes from finally being able to stand up for yourself after years of being pushed down. I told them that they'd made their choice 4 years ago when they chose James over me. I reminded them of every missed school event, every achievement they'd ignored, every time they'd made me feel less than because I wasn't James. The words poured out of me like a river that had been dammed up for too long. Now they had to live with the consequences. Then I dropped the real bomb on them.